Have you ever wondered behind the majestic sphinx and the colossal pyramids that defy time, what other secrets lie dormant in the shadows of ancient Egypt? People often tell tales of pharaohs, of the gods of the Nile, of glittering treasures of pure gold. But very few mention another world, a hazy, intoxicating world where flowers, leaves, and seeds became gateways for people to step out of reality and touch the mystical realm. Ancient Egypt was one of the most brilliant and enduring civilizations in human history. They not only built magnificent structures and created hieroglyphic writing, but also developed medicine and religion to an incredible level. The Egyptians held a powerful belief that the mortal world was just a small part of existence. Beyond it lay the realm of spirits, where the gods reigned. And to access the divine, they needed special means, not just prayers, not just rituals, but also herbs and plants with mystical powers. In the texts inscribed on papyrus, in the paintings that remain on tomb walls, scholars have found many ambiguous clues. Images of blue lotus flowers blooming on the surface of lakes, baskets of seeds offered as tributes, and inscriptions describing potions that make a person weightless, the soul ascending with the gods. Although no one is left to confirm it, these pieces of the puzzle have led archaeologists to ask, did the ancient Egyptians know and use various types of hallucinogenic, herb substances that made the body euphoric and the mind detached from the physical form, opening a door to communicate with another world? This is not so far-fetched. We know that many other ancient civilizations, from the Greeks and the Maya to the tribes of the Americas, used mushrooms, leaves, or medicinal roots in their religious ceremonies. For Egypt, where religion was intricately linked to every aspect of life, from the royal court to the peasantry, the search for a bridge through herbs was entirely plausible. Imagine this. In a great temple on the banks of the Nile, incense smoke fills the air with a hazy mist. Priests in white robes chant incantations. Before them are goblets of wine infused with blue lotus flowers or the smoke of cannabis lingering in the space. The participants begin to fall into a dreamlike state, their bodies feeling light, as if the gods Horus or Osiris themselves were present in the hall. To them, this was not intoxication as we understand it today. It was a spiritual transcendence, a doorway opening into the sacred realm. But it wasn't just in religious rituals that these herbs appeared. They were also present in daily life. In the Pharaoh's palace, feasts were held with wine and sweet beer, sometimes mixed with lotus petals or mandrake root, a plant called the magic ginseng for its bizarre, human-like shape. Queens and princesses might have used them as a kind of love potion. And in the marketplaces, common people sometimes imitated the nobility, seeking out their own seeds and leaves to prepare in their own ways. This is a rarely mentioned, hidden corner of history. The ancient Egyptians did not just worship gods, build temples, or study medicine. They were also immersed in a culture of herbs that once mystical, dangerous, and enchanting. Flowers that seemed merely decorative became conduits for the soul. Plants growing along the Nile, if used correctly, could become a stairway for the human mind to step into another world. Therefore, to truly understand ancient Egypt, we must look beyond the pyramids and tombs. We need to step into that world of herbal smoke and haze, a place where a single flower could become the key to unlocking the door to the divine. And on this journey, we will together explore the herbs that once appeared in Egypt, used in medicine, in rituals, and in royal life, from the blue lotus, cannabis, and mandrake to mysterious poisons and opium. These plants not only changed the body, but also altered the way the Egyptians perceived life and death. So, what exactly were these herbs? How were they used? And how did the feeling of getting high for the ancient Egyptians differ from ours today? If the introduction opened a door into the mysterious hazy world of ancient Egypt in this part, we will step deeper to get a closer look at each plant, each flower, each seed things that the Egyptians saw not just as medicine but as keys leading to the gods and the invisible realm. Interestingly, each of these herbs carries its own story, its own symbol, and its own unique use. Some induced a light, relaxing euphoria. Others opened the door to intense hallucinations, so vivid that users believed they were conversing with the gods. Some were medicinal, but when abused, they became addictive substances, and all of them blended together to create a mystical picture of the hallucinogenic culture of ancient Egypt. Egyptian blue lotus, Nymphaea caerulea. No plant is more closely associated with ancient Egypt than the blue lotus. On tomb walls and carved reliefs, the blue lotus appears everywhere, in the hands of pharaohs, on altars, and in sacrificial ceremonies. To the Egyptians, the blue lotus was a symbol of the sun, of life, rebirth, and immortality. Every morning, the flower bloomed brilliantly under the sun. At night, it closed and sank into the darkness like the cycle of life and death. However, beyond its symbolic meaning, the blue lotus held a secret. It had psychoactive effects that created feelings of euphoria. When steeped in wine or brewed as a tea, the blue lotus releases alkaloids that can induce relaxation, create a sense of lightheadedness, and enhance feelings of pleasure. The Egyptians believed that when drinking this lotus-infused wine, the soul would become weightless, easily able to ascend to meet the gods. Much archaeological evidence shows that the blue lotus was widely used during major festivals. Wine jars with chemical traces of the blue lotus have been found in royal tombs. Some sources even suggest that pharaohs and queens used the blue lotus as a type of love potion, helping to connect the physical and spiritual in secret royal rituals. Imagine a lavish banquet. The flickering oil lamps reflect on the golden walls. Musical instruments play an enchanting melody, and in the pharaoh's hand is a goblet of wine steeped with blue lotus petals. Each sip seems to push him further from reality, allowing his soul to merge with the god Rhea in the sky. For the Egyptians, this wasn't just being drunk, it was a spiritual journey. Cannabis. No less important was cannabis. Although cannabis is often thought of as a modern phenomenon, it was actually used in Egypt thousands of years ago. Archaeological evidence shows that cannabis seeds have been found in several ancient tombs, and ancient Egyptian medical texts describe the use of cannabis to relieve pain, treat inflammation, and reduce anxiety. However, cannabis was not limited to medicinal purposes. When burned or smoked, cannabis produced a high, the body felt light, the mind expanded, and perception changed. For this reason, it was quickly incorporated into religious ceremonies. In the thick smoke of cannabis, priests felt as if a mist surrounded them, pulling them out of the mortal world and into a sacred realm. You may have heard of mystical ceremonies where priests heard the voices of the gods or saw the spirits of their ancestors. It is highly likely that cannabis was the catalyst for these mystical experiences. To them, cannabis was not a forbidden substance, but a sacred tool for communicating with the divine. Mandrake, the magic ginseng. Among the mystical herbs, the mandrake, a plant with a root resembling the human form, is unforgettable. With its bizarre appearance, the mandrake has long been shrouded in countless legends. The Egyptians regarded it as a living charm, a symbol of love, lust, and fertility. The extract from the mandrake root can cause powerful hallucinations, putting a person in a dreamlike state. Not only that, but it was also considered an extremely effective aphrodisiac, often used in the royal court to maintain the enthusiasm of the pharaoh and queen. A popular tale suggests that during private parties, the pharaoh would have a goblet of mandrake wine served. Upon drinking it, the feeling of pleasure and hallucination would transform the party into a sacred ritual of love. For the Egyptians, sexuality was not just an instinct, it was a part of religion, of creation and rebirth. Thus, the mandrake became the divine herb of life. Henbane, the Egyptian poison. If the blue lotus and cannabis brought gentleness and mandrake brought pleasure, henbane was the plant that led people to another world, a world of intense hallucinations. Henbane contains many toxic alkaloids. When burned, its smoke causes those who inhale it to fall into a state of paranoia and delirium, even feeling a sense of leaving their bodies. The Egyptians believed that henbane could help the soul separate from the body to temporarily travel to the world of the gods. In special ceremonies, henbane was often burned with incense and other herbs. As the smoke billowed, the entire temple would be submerged in a hazy mist. Priests would enter a trance, their voices chanting, their bodies trembling, and everyone believed that the gods had descended. It wasn't just smoke, it was the bridge between humans and the divine. Opium from the poppy plant. Another addictive substance mentioned in ancient Egyptian medical texts is opium. Extracted from the resin of the poppy plant, opium has an extremely powerful pain-relieving effect and was therefore used in ancient medicine to treat many ailments, especially to reduce pain during surgery and childbirth. However, just like today, opium easily led to dependence and addiction. Scholars suggest that in the Egyptian court, opium may have been used as a secret pleasure during extravagant parties. With its numbing and euphoric effects, opium quickly became a double-edged sword, both a medicine and a dangerous addictive substance. Hallucinogenic mushrooms, a controversial hypothesis. Although there is no clear evidence, some researchers have hypothesized that the Egyptians may have known and used hallucinogenic mushrooms. On some ancient murals, there are images that resemble mushrooms drawn alongside religious symbols. If this is true, their experience could have been even more powerful than that of the blue lotus or mandrake. Psilocybin mushrooms are known for creating intense hallucinations, making people believe they are in direct contact with the divine. Could this be the great secret that Egypt has hidden away in its tombs, a high world of ancient Egypt? Looking back, we see that ancient Egypt possessed a treasure trove of mystical herbs, used both for healing and for expanding consciousness. The blue lotus brought relaxation and gentle pleasure. Cannabis helped the mind soar. Mandrake was a love potion and a magical plant. Henbane brought people closer to an out-of-body state. Opium both healed and addicted. And somewhere, hallucinogenic mushrooms remain an unsolved mystery. For the Egyptians, all of this was not just for fun, not just a recreational habit. It was a part of their religion, their beliefs, and their way of communicating with the gods. And because of this, the psychoactive herb culture of Egypt has become one of the most unique pieces in the mosaic of human history. In the previous part, we saw an enchanting world. Fragrant blue lotus, soaring cannabis, mysterious mandrake, mesmerizing henbane, sweet opium. All served as a gateway for the ancient Egyptians to step out of reality and touch the divine realm. But as you know, every obsession has its dark side. And in the history of Egypt, these hallucinogenic herbs also left behind painful consequences for both individuals and society. Addiction, from royalty to commoners. At first, these herbs were seen as sacred tools. They were used in temples, rituals, or sometimes at the lavish parties of the pharaohs. But once people tasted that feeling of euphoria and pleasure, they could easily be drawn into an inescapable vortex. Many ancient medical records show that physicians had to prescribe treatments to detoxify patients from the overuse of herbs. Opium from the poppy plant is a prime example. Initially a pain reliever, it soon caused many to become dependent, unable to live without it. The same was true for cannabis farmers after imitating the nobility, began to grow and use it themselves, turning it into a daily habit. This addiction not only affected health, but also weakened labor productivity, creating silent disruptions in social life, social disparity, and collective intoxication. What is noteworthy is that while the aristocracy and priesthood regarded these herbs as sacred offerings or symbols of power, the common people could only access them in crude, uncontrolled forms. The result was episodes of collective intoxication in villages where beer, wine, and cannabis were mixed with blue lotus. Some ancient documents record scenes of village festivals descending into chaos, singing, dancing, and then outbreaks of violence. People began to fear that the abuse of these substances could cause society to lose its stability. Temples, sacred spaces, or hazy realms. Egyptian temples were originally places connecting the divine with humanity. But when the smoke of henbane and cannabis was burned densely, many rituals turned into stages for hallucinations. Priests would enter trances, uttering words believed to be holy pronouncements. The public knelt in worship, believing the gods were present. However, the downside was this: an over-reliance on hallucinations sometimes caused religion to lose its clarity. Some researchers argue that because the rituals were so heavily steeped in hazy intoxication, prophecies became difficult to distinguish what was a divine message and what was a human hallucination. This could have directly influenced the political and military decisions of the pharaohs, health, and the price to pay. It cannot be denied that many herbs had medicinal effects, relieving pain, sedating, and aiding childbirth. But when abused, the consequences were severe. Opium caused dependence, leading to physical exhaustion and mental fatigue. Mandrake and henbane, in high doses, could cause intense hallucinations, convulsions, and even death. Cannabis and blue lotus, frequent use could lead to a loss of focus and weakened ability to work. Archaeological evidence from mummies shows that many ancient Egyptians suffered from liver and kidney diseases, as well as nervous system disorders which may be directly related to the abuse of alcohol, beer, and herbs. When divine medicine becomes a double-edged sword. Initially, these herbs were considered gifts from the gods, helping people escape physical pain and connect with the invisible realm. But when people no longer distinguished the line between ritual and daily habit, these gifts turned into a double-edged sword. Ancient Egypt, the glorious civilization on the banks of the Nile, also had to face a harsh reality. The very things that made them soar for a moment could also pull them into the abyss in the long run. And that is only part of the story, because beyond the individual impact, the use of herbs also created very specific social and religious reactions. So how did the Egyptians perceive it? Did they see it as sacred or as a menace? If we only stopped at the medical or recreational aspects, the hallucinogenic herbs of ancient Egypt might not have left such a deep impression. But what makes them unique, different from other civilizations, is this: they were placed within a religious and social context where everything revolved around gods, rituals, and communal order. Herbs as sacred offerings. In many carvings and drawings, we see the blue lotus placed in the hands of the pharaoh or on the altars of the gods Osiris and Isis. To the Egyptians, it was not just a flower, it was a symbol of rebirth, of sunlight rising from the darkness. The use of the lotus in rituals was therefore not seen as intoxication in a negative sense, but as an act of communion with the divine. Similarly, cannabis and various aromatic resins were burned in temples, their billowing smoke creating a sacred atmosphere while also guiding the human mind into a state of trance. For the priestly class, this was a means to open a window to the divine, a legitimate and revered practice. Social stratification and usage, but not everyone approached herbs in this way. The nobility and priesthood used them in formal contexts, while the common people tended to use them for entertainment. This led to two contrasting images. In the palace, the pharaoh and his guests would sip lotus wine, listen to music, and experience divine beauty. In the marketplace, villagers would gather, drink herb-infused beer, sing, and sometimes descend into chaos. This difference meant that herbs were simultaneously regarded as sacred and seen as a potential threat if not controlled. Religion, hallucination, or revelation? This is the big question. When a priest, after inhaling the smoke of henbane or cannabis, spoke to channel the words of a god, who could be certain whether it was a true revelation or merely a hallucination generated in the brain. The ancient Egyptians absolutely believed that gods could enter a human body through ritual. But from a modern perspective, we know that many of these experiences were simply chemical effects. However, it was this very ambiguity that made religion all the more mysterious and difficult to challenge. Herbs, therefore, became the bridge between hallucination and faith. And Egyptian religion leveraged this to consolidate the power of the priests and the pharaoh, those who claimed to be directly guided by the gods. Community reaction. Not everyone was supportive. Some classes in society, particularly conservatives, saw the abuse of herbs as a cause of social disorder. Farmers needed to work, soldiers needed to be healthy. If they became lost in hallucinations, the country would weaken. This is partly reflected in ancient medical texts, where physicians warned against dependence on plant resin or death from poisonous roots. This means that even within Egyptian society, there was a tension between religious belief and the realities of daily life. Herbs, from faith to power. Despite the controversy, one thing is certain. The use of herbs helped consolidate the power of the ruling class. The pharaoh and the priesthood, with their ability to communicate with the divine through herbs, became the center of belief. The populace, though perhaps skeptical, had to accept it because it was part of the socio-religious structure. In other words, the intoxication was not just happening in the mind, but it also spread to become a political tool. So, after all the mystical rituals and hallucinations, what lessons and legacies did the Egyptians leave for posterity from their use of herbs? Was it just a series of dangerous games, or was it also a testament to their creativity and aspiration to touch the invisible world? As our journey comes to an end, you have probably sensed it. The world of ancient Egypt was not just about the great stone blocks of the pyramids, not just the mysterious sphinx statues, but also a civilization of incense smoke, of flowers and leaves, of spiritual journeys. These hallucinogenic herbs became a strange bridge connecting humans to gods, the mortal world to the afterlife, and physical pain to spiritual solace. Looking back on the journey together, we have traveled a long road. Starting with the blue lotus flowers blooming on the Nile, a symbol of rebirth and light, to cabinas, a plant both familiar and mysterious, burned in temples and at royal banquets. Then mandrake, with its human-shaped root that gave birth to so many myths about magic. Followed by henbane, with its power to induce hallucinations so intense that the line between reality and illusion was blurred. And finally opium, both a divine painkiller and a trap that led people into the cycle of addiction. All of this has given us a clearer view. The ancient Egyptians were no strangers to the feeling of getting high. But for them, it was not just a pleasure-seeking activity, but a serious part of their religious, political, and social life. What makes this story so interesting is its reflection. What happened in Egypt thousands of years ago has echoes in the modern world. Today, we are still debating. Should cannabis be legalized? Can hallucinogens be used in psychiatric therapy? Does an out-of-body experience have true spiritual value, or is it just a chemical game played by the brain? The questions that the ancient Egyptians unconsciously posed still have no definitive answers today. And that is the power of history. It not only tells us about the past, but also makes us reflect on ourselves. If the Egyptians could use herbs to seek the gods, how much further can modern humanity go? When science today begins to study psychedelics like psilocybin, magic mushrooms, ayahuasca or LSD to treat depression, PTSD, and expand consciousness, we see a strange repetition of history. Could it be that what the ancient Egyptians did 3,000 years ago, sipping a goblet of lotus wine, inhaling a wisp of cannabis smoke, was the precursor to the neuroscience revolution of the 21st century? Could it be that in our journey to understand the brain and the spiritual universe, humanity is following the hazy path that ancient Egypt once trod? But is that really the whole story?